The maître d' barely glanced at me before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, madam, but there's no reservation under your name." I blinked, momentarily thrown off. "That's impossible. I was invited to dinner with my husband's family. They should already be here." He gave me a polite but firm smile. "I just checked. There's a reservation for 6 under Morgan Sinclair, but I'm afraid." A sharp, familiar voice cut through the conversation. "Oh, Claire." Morgan's voice dripped with amusement. "Did you really think I'd include you in tonight's dinner?" I turned to see my mother-in-law standing a few feet away, dressed in her usual designer ensemble, platinum blonde hair perfectly styled. Behind her, my husband Adam sat stiffly, his gaze darting between us, clearly uncomfortable but silent. Beside him, his sisters Charlotte and Emma whispered to each other, smirking. I felt my stomach twist, but I refused to let it show. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice calm. Morgan's smile widened. "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't think you'd actually come." She chuckled as if I had done something amusing. "This is a family dinner. A place like this is, well, a bit out of your league, don't you think? Maybe a budget restaurant suits you better." Charlotte snickered behind her wine glass. Emma avoided my gaze. Adam, he just sat there gripping his fork, silent. Humiliation settled in, thick enough to choke on. Other guests had begun to notice, their curious glances flicking toward the unfolding drama. I should have seen this coming. Morgan had spent years making it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. I didn't come from old money, hadn't attended prestigious schools, wasn't born into their privileged world. From the moment Adam and I got engaged, Morgan had made it her mission to remind me I didn't belong. At first, it was subtle, passive-aggressive remarks about my simple tastes, conveniently forgetting to invite me to family events, expensive gifts for Adam while giving me nothing but empty smiles. But tonight she had taken things to a whole new level, ensuring I would be left standing at the entrance like an unwanted outsider. And she was relishing every second of it. The embarrassment should have burned, should have made me feel small. But instead something inside me clicked. I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made Morgan's expression falter for just a second. Then without a word I turned to the maître d'. "Would you be so kind as to ask the owner to come out?" My voice was smooth, confident. Morgan let out a laugh. "Oh please. Do you really think the owner of this place is going to come out just because you asked?" I met her gaze evenly. "Yes. Because the owner of this restaurant knows me very well. And in a few moments, my dear mother-in-law, you're about to learn a lesson you'll never forget." Morgan's smirk didn't waver, but I saw it, that slight flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had spent years treating me like an outsider. But tonight she had escalated her little game into outright humiliation, in front of my husband, his sisters, and a restaurant full of people. The air grew thick with anticipation as I stood my ground. The maître d' hesitated, unsure whether to humor my request, but before he could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Claire." I turned just as Daniel Leone, the owner of this exclusive establishment, stepped into view. A man in his early 50s, Daniel was the epitome of refined elegance, salt and pepper hair, a tailored suit, and the kind of confidence that came with owning one of the most sought-after restaurants in the city. Morgan's eyes widened slightly as she registered the way he looked at me, not with dismissal but with genuine warmth. "Daniel," I greeted, my smile widening. "It's been a while." His gaze flickered to Morgan, then to Adam and his sisters before settling back on me. "Yes. What brings you here tonight?" I gestured toward the table where my in-laws sat, their expressions shifting from amusement to uncertainty. "Apparently, I wasn't included in the reservation," I said lightly. "A bit of an oversight, wouldn't you say?" Daniel's eyes darkened slightly, catching the unspoken subtext. Then just as quickly a polite smile curved his lips. "That won't do at all." Morgan scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh please. Do you really think this restaurant can just find a seat for her? This is a private dining establishment. You don't just walk in and expect a table. Daniel's expression remained unreadable. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Sinclair. This restaurant does not accept last-minute walk-ins. I felt a pang of disappointment, but before I could respond, he turned to the maître d'. But Claire is not a walk-in. She is family. The entire table froze. Charlotte's glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Emma's eyes darted between me and Daniel in shock. Adam tightened his grip on his silverware, but still he said nothing. Morgan, however, wasn't one to back down easily. She let out a disbelieving laugh. Family? Oh, this is rich. You must be mistaken. Claire is my son's wife, and I assure you she has no connections to. Actually, I interrupted smoothly, Daniel and I go way back. Morgan narrowed her eyes. How? I leaned forward slightly, just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Before I married Adam, I worked in fine dining. Daniel was my mentor. A stunned silence settled over the table. Morgan opened her mouth, likely to protest, but Daniel cut her off. Claire isn't just some former employee, he said calmly. She trained under me when she was fresh out of culinary school. I personally taught her everything she knows about hospitality and high-end service. She was one of the best students I ever had. Morgan's jaw tightened. This was not going as she had planned. The realization settled in. Despite all her efforts to belittle me, I had a past she knew nothing about, one that now undermined her entire stunt. I turned to the maître d'. I assume Daniel's word is good enough to find me a seat? The maître d' immediately straightened. Of course, Miss Claire. I'll have the staff prepare a table right away. Morgan's face flushed a shade of red I had never seen before. This is ridiculous, she hissed. What's ridiculous is that you thought you could humiliate me and get away with it, I murmured. Daniel patted my shoulder. I'll have the chef send over something special for you. Morgan nearly choked. Something special? On the house, of course, Daniel replied. Morgan seethed, but there was nothing she could do. Adam reached for his drink, his expression unreadable. Was it relief, embarrassment, shame? I wasn't sure. But what I did know was this dinner had just begun. And Morgan Sinclair was about to regret ever thinking she could dismiss me so easily. It was about reminding me in front of everyone that in her eyes, I was still just a woman who had worked her way up from nothing. I took another sip of wine before responding. You say that like it's a bad thing. Morgan's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, maybe even a bit of surprise. She had expected me to be rattled, but I wasn't. Not anymore. I simply meant, she continued, that it must have been quite an adjustment for you marrying into a family like ours. Her tone was light, but the words dripped with condescension. And Adam, he still said nothing. I turned my gaze to him, studying the way he refused to meet my eyes. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about his mother's cruelty. This was about his silence. Because this wasn't the first time Morgan had tried to humiliate me. It had happened at our wedding when she conveniently forgot to invite my side of the family to the rehearsal dinner. It had happened at Christmas when she gifted me a cookbook titled Simple Recipes for the Clueless Wife in front of an entire room of people. It had happened last summer when she made a snide remark about how fortunate I was that Adam had taken a chance on me. And every single time Adam had let it slide. And I had told myself it wasn't worth fighting over, that I didn't want to be the cause of conflict. But this was different. This wasn't just a passive-aggressive comment. This was an orchestrated attempt to humiliate me in public. And he had let it happen. I set my wine glass down, the movement slow and deliberate. Then I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the table. Morgan, I said, my voice smooth even. Do you know what the difference is between you and me? She tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes despite herself. I smiled. I worked for everything I have. A sharp, stunned silence fell over the table. Morgan's face hardened. Excuse me. I didn't blink. You heard me. I felt Charlotte stiffen beside her mother. Emma pressed her lips together as if suppressing a laugh. Morgan scoffed. Are you trying to imply that I haven't worked for what I have? I let the question hang in the air, then before she could formulate another condescending response I added, I didn't marry into wealth. I didn't inherit status. I built my career from the ground up. And yet, I gestured at the table. Here we are sitting at the same restaurant eating the same food with the same level of respect from the owner. Morgan's fingers curled around her napkin, knuckles white. Charlotte and Emma weren't laughing anymore. And Adam, he looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. For the first time since I had met Morgan, I saw something flicker across her face. Something she usually hid too well. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Because she had spent years trying to convince herself that I didn't belong, that I was lesser, that I was just some gold digger who had latched onto her son. But now she was starting to realize the truth. And the truth was that I was not someone she could break. I picked up my fork, casually cutting into my dish again. Oh, and Morgan. She exhaled sharply through her nose, clearly furious that I had stolen control of the conversation. What? I smiled, slow and deliberate. You should be careful about who you look down on. I speared a bite of food and placed it in my mouth, chewing slowly before adding, you never know who might end up above you. The tension at the table was suffocating. Morgan, usually poised and in complete control, sat stone-faced, her fingers curled so tightly around her wine glass that I half expected it to shatter. Adam looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. Charlotte and Emma were stealing glances at each other, clearly wondering if they should intervene. And me, I had never felt more certain of my place. I could see it in Morgan's expression, the way her carefully curated mask of superiority had cracked, even if just for a moment. She wasn't used to being challenged. She had built her power on people bending to her will, on people being too afraid or too polite to put her in her place. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Morgan took a slow breath, composing herself before placing her glass down with a soft but deliberate click. I see, she said finally, her voice deceptively smooth. I suppose I should commend you, Claire. You've managed to elevate yourself beyond your circumstances. I took another sip of my wine, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction. But tell me, she continued, her lips curving into a saccharine smile. If you're so independent, so self-made, why is it that my son is the one paying for your lifestyle? I paused. Charlotte let out a quiet gasp. Emma shifted uncomfortably. And Adam flinched. Morgan's smile sharpened. She could feel the eyes of the table on me now, waiting for a response. I set my glass down, my movements slow and deliberate. What do you mean by that? I asked, feigning confusion. Morgan leaned forward, dropping her voice to a mocking whisper. I mean, darling, that my son is the reason you can afford that lovely little boutique job of yours, isn't he? You don't actually need to work, yet you play pretend at having a career. How charming. She tilted her head, her smug smile returning. You talk about self-sufficiency, but at the end of the day you're still just someone my son supports. And there was her final card. The insult meant to humiliate me beyond recovery. The final blow to put me back in my place. I let the words settle, taking in the way Adam still refused to look at me. The way his sisters held their breath, waiting for me to crumble. And then I laughed. Not a small, embarrassed chuckle. A full, genuine laugh. Morgan's smirk faltered. I'm sorry, is something funny? I placed my napkin back onto the table, still chuckling. I just realized how truly out of touch you are, Morgan. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I gestured toward Adam, my voice calm and deliberate. You think he supports me? I asked, arching a brow. That's adorable. Charlotte made a choking sound. Emma's lips parted in shock. And Adam went pale. Morgan's smile dropped instantly. What are you talking about? I sighed, almost pitying her. You still see Adam as your little boy, don't you? The one in control, the provider, the man who rescued me from my lowly life. I tilted my head. But let me tell you something, Morgan. That's not how this marriage works. Morgan stiffened. You want to know what's funny? I continued. Adam's business, his investment projects, half of them were funded with my money. A stunned silence fell over the table. Morgan's eyes widened, her entire world shifting in real time. What? She whispered. I smiled, but this time there was no warmth in it. Adam didn't build his career alone, I continued, still speaking to her but keeping my gaze locked on my husband. When he wanted to start investing, he didn't have the capital. I picked up my wine glass again. But I did. Morgan's fingers twitched. That's not possible. I shrugged. Believe what you want. But the reality is your son's success is built on my investments. Charlotte and Emma turned to Adam for confirmation, but he remained silent, frozen in place. I shook my head. You think you can humiliate me by portraying me as some helpless little housewife? That's amusing because the truth is, Adam needs me far more than I need him. Morgan's face darkened with anger. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You've spent years trying to make me feel like I don't belong, but in reality, I've been the one keeping this marriage and your precious family name afloat. Emma looked like she might faint. Charlotte was utterly speechless. And Adam, he finally managed to open his mouth. Claire, he croaked, maybe we should. I raised a hand, cutting him off. No, Adam, I said firmly. You don't get to maybe we should me. Not after you sat there in silence while your mother tried to tear me down. Morgan turned to look at him, realization dawning for the first time. Her golden boy was spineless. For once she didn't seem so proud. Instead she looked at him like he was small, beneath her expectations, like he had failed her. The shift was almost satisfying. I smoothed down my dress and stood. I think I'm done here. Morgan's nostrils flared. You can't just. I ignored her, turning instead to Daniel, who had been observing from a polite distance. Daniel, it was lovely seeing you. Thank you for the hospitality. He gave an amused nod. Always a pleasure, Claire. Then I turned to Adam. Are you coming? He hesitated, glancing between me and his mother. And in that moment I knew exactly what he would do. Adam had never chosen me before, and he wasn't about to start now. Morgan's smile was triumphant. But I smiled right back, because what she didn't know was that I had already made my choice too. And soon she would regret ever trying to put me in my place. I was about to show her and Adam exactly how powerful I really was. Adam didn't follow me. I hadn't expected him to. As I stepped outside the restaurant, the cool night air brushed against my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was clear. This dinner had been a long overdue wake-up call, a moment of truth years in the making. And now it was time to act. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I typed a message. We're moving forward. Initiate the process first thing tomorrow. Within seconds the response came. Understood. You'll have the first draft of the divorce settlement by noon. I exhaled slowly, staring at the screen. Divorce. The word didn't scare me. What scared me was how long I had ignored the truth. That Adam had never been on my side. That for years I had been alone in my own marriage. But not anymore. Tonight had been the final push I needed. Morgan? She had no idea how completely I was about to upend the life she had worked so hard to control. I arrived home before Adam, giving me just enough time to do what needed to be done. First, I walked into the home office. The one Adam used for his investments. I opened the safe. He had never changed the passcode. A careless mistake. Inside were financial documents, bank statements, investment portfolios, business agreements. But I was interested in one in particular. The contract that tied his most lucrative investment to my initial fund. I picked it up, scanning the familiar legal jargon. This document proved that I was the financial backbone of his entire empire. Morgan had always believed her son was the brilliant businessman of the family, but without me he was nothing. I snapped a quick photo of the contract and placed it back exactly where I found it. There was no need to take it, I already had everything I needed. Next I went to the bedroom, I pulled out a suitcase and began packing. Not in anger, not in haste, but with absolute clarity. This wasn't an emotional decision. This was a calculated departure. By the time Adam walked through the front door, I was seated on the couch, suitcase by my side, waiting. He paused in the doorway, staring at me like he wasn't sure if he had come home to the right house. "Claire." I tilted my head. "Took you long enough." His eyes darted to the suitcase, his breath catching. "What are you doing?" I stood calm and composed. He opened his mouth slightly, but no words came out. "You made your choice, Adam," I said smoothly. "Back there at the restaurant when your mother tried to humiliate me again, and you just sat there." His jaw tensed. I was trying to keep the peace. I laughed. "Peace? Adam, your mother orchestrated that entire dinner to embarrass me. She booked a table and purposely left me off the reservation. She insulted me. She made it clear she doesn't think I belong." I stepped closer, watching him shrink slightly under my gaze. "And you let her? Just like you always do." He rubbed the back of his neck, flustered. "It's complicated, Claire. You know how she is." I exhaled. "No, Adam. It's simple. You're weak." His eyes snapped to mine, offended, but it was the truth. "You've spent our entire marriage letting your mother dictate how you treat me. I was patient, Adam. I gave you so many chances. But tonight..." I shook my head. "Tonight I finally saw you for what you are." Adam swallowed hard. "Claire, let's just talk about this." I sighed. "That's the problem, Adam. There's nothing left to talk about." I picked up my suitcase and brushed past him. Just as I reached the door, he spoke. "I'll fight you on this." I turned back. "What?" His face darkened. His voice was low. "If you think you're walking away with half of everything, you're mistaken." I studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Oh, Adam," I said softly. "You really should read your own contracts more carefully." Confusion flickered across his face. "What?" I cut him off. "You wouldn't even have half of what you own if it weren't for me. You used my money to build your investments. And guess what? I let the moment hang. I have all the paperwork to prove it." His face drained of color. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I let you borrow my money, Adam. I let you build something with it. But now..." I smiled. "Now I want it back." Adam staggered back a step as reality hit him. He thought he could threaten me. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He stood frozen, pale, jaw clenched. I could see the exact moment he realized I wasn't just leaving. I was taking everything he thought he controlled. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, to beg, to manipulate me like he always had. But I didn't give him the chance. "I'll be staying at the penthouse," I said, adjusting the strap of my bag. His brows furrowed. "What penthouse?" I smiled, tilting my head slightly. "Oh, Adam. The one you think you own." I watched as confusion turned to horror. "The downtown penthouse?" he asked, voice uneven. The one I bought under my name?" "Yes," I said smoothly. "Had my lawyer review the ownership documents today. It was never yours." His nostrils flared. "You wouldn't." "I already did." I pulled an envelope from my bag and tossed it onto the counter. He hesitated before opening it, his hands shaking as he read the legal document inside. His throat tightened. This says you own 51% of my investment firm." I nodded. "Correct." His breathing grew unsteady. "That's impossible." I shrugged. "Not really. I was the initial investor, remember? I never transferred ownership to you. You just assumed I did because, well, you never actually read the contracts, did you?" I watched as panic settled over him, his mind racing, scrambling for an explanation, a loophole, anything. "Claire," he said, voice tight, "you can't just take this from me." I smiled. "I'm not taking anything. I already own it." He staggered back, gripping the counter for support. This was the man who had let his mother humiliate me, who had sat there in cowardly silence while she tried to strip me of my dignity. And now he was the one powerless. "I don't understand," he muttered. Why are you doing this?" For the first time in years I felt truly, undeniably free. "Because Adam," I said, my voice calm, "I finally see my worth." With that I turned and walked out of the house for the last time. A month later I sat in the penthouse, legs crossed, a glass of champagne in hand. Across from me my attorney smiled, sliding the finalized divorce papers toward me. "It's official. You're free." I exhaled slowly, running my fingers over the thick pages. Free. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, a legal battle swift and brutal. Adam had tried to fight, of course. He stormed into meetings, demanded a better deal, threatened court action. But the moment my lawyers laid out the documents proving I was the majority shareholder in his firm, his arrogance crumbled. Morgan had tried to intervene. She called me furious, spitting accusations. "You're nothing but a gold-digging snake." I had simply replied, "If you raised him better, this wouldn't have happened." Then I blocked her number. Morgan Sinclair was no longer my problem. I lifted my champagne glass, savoring the moment. And then, as if the universe wanted to give me one last laugh, my phone buzzed. "Adam, can we talk?" I smirked, setting the glass down, fingers gliding over the screen. "About what?" Pause. Adam, I don't know what to do." I exhaled, shaking my head. It was sad, really. 4 years I had waited for Adam to show up, to be the man I thought I married. I had waited for him to stand up to his mother, to fight for me the way I had fought for him. But now I saw him clearly. A man who had spent his life hiding behind the power of others. Too weak to build anything on his own. And the irony? He needed me now more than ever. But I didn't need him at all. I typed one final message. "Me, that's not my problem anymore." Then I blocked his number too. Because for the first time in my life I was choosing myself. And that was the most powerful thing I had ever done.